Well, once again, good morning. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Ethan. I am the director of students and crews, which I was reminded after first service, I'm not a cruise director. People are like mad that I'm not like trying to plan their cruise. I'm incredibly excited to be able to talk to you guys today. If we haven't met, I would love to connect with you. I'm married to a gal. Her name's Emily, and we have 3 kids. We've lived in Utah for a few years, but we're back, and so I'm excited not just to be on staff at this church, but I'm excited to call this place our home and to call you guys our family. And so incredibly excited that Gerald's not here today, so I can get to, he was actually here first service, and he wore the same sweater as me. I'm not joking. And I was like, really, you're going to come today and wear this sweater? Kidding me. Well, we're in a series called The Art of Being Unordinary. And this series is about this guy named Nehemiah, and he was a fantastic leader. And this series is all about leadership and vision and influence. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, I'm not a leader. I'm not really a leader. I'm just a blank. And however you feel that, I'm just a hairstylist, or I'm just an IT guy, or I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or I'm just a student. However you fill that blank in, I'm just a blank. I'm not a leader. Well, I would disagree. I would say this. If you have a circle of influence, people that you have invested in or built trust with, then you are a leader. If you have friends, if you have neighbors, clients, coworkers, kids living in your home, then you have influence. You have influence. And I would also say this. We all want to maximize our influence. If you think about it, we all want to maximize our influence to the people around us. And sometimes to maximize our influence, we have to do a few things unordinary, right? So my hope is today that we would all take a step toward maximizing the people around us and the influence we have on them. Now, near the end of 2012, I found myself living in Charlotte. I've been here for maybe a year, 6 months, a year, and dating this girl, right? And I say it like that because she was crazy. She was kind of obsessed with me. And, but I thought we had really done this right. We had done this relationship right, and it was a foundation of trust and invested time. And I thought, you know what? I think this girl could be the one. She's the one. So what did I do? I planned. I thought, I'm going to save up. I'm going to buy a ring. And I kept planning and prepping. I'm going to find an outfit. My hair looked great anyway. I didn't have to worry about that. Find an outfit, a place to do it, and a time and day. And I'm going to ask this girl to be my wife. And so I remember this. I remember in January 2013, driving to Charlotte, downtown Charlotte, or uptown. Why do they call it uptown? Anyway, driving down, ring in my pocket. She's in the passenger seat. We park the car. We're walking, and this is the spot. Like I'm seeing where I have to do it because we're about to walk into this restaurant. I have to do it before so it's like a do or die moment, and I've planned and I've prepped, and I know this is the right moment to do it. But still in that moment, as I go to bend down on my one knee, I'm terrified, right? I'm terrified. Even though I planned and prepped everything that I would say, which I could have probably done a better job because I was still kind of like a blabbering idiot. But I prepped and planned everything I would say, but I was still scared in that moment. I was still scared. And maybe you've experienced the same thing. Maybe when you proposed, you planned and prepped, and you were still terrified. Or maybe you own your own business and you have to make this decision, and you've thought through it, it's the right decision to make, and you've planned and you've prepped, and now it's the do or die moment. But yeah, you're still afraid. Maybe you're a student in the room and you have a project and you've worked for months on this project. And you put time and invested energy and resources into this project. And the moments before you where you're walking up to the front of the classroom, we've all experienced moments where we've planned and prepped, but we're still terrified in that moment. Well, that's exactly where we find Nehemiah today. We find him in that same similar place. Just to recap what's happened to Nehemiah so far, we find Nehemiah in exile. He's in this foreign country, away from his home, while his home is in destruction. In the past few weeks, we've talked about how Nehemiah, he mourns the loss of his home. He mourns for his people. He's broken for his home. In this moment, we see actually how great of a leader Nehemiah is. In this moment of brokenness, he's able to look past himself, past his own emotion, to what he should be doing. What he should be doing. He says, well, I'm broken, but if I mourn and do nothing, well, then nothing will change. But if I stop mourning and rush to the king and plead with him, well, he'll just laugh in my face and probably have me killed. So he's thinking, what can I do? We see Nehemiah's vision. Now, this is unlike the visions you may have had in the 70s. I'm not here to judge. Okay. Some of you did have probably visions in the 70s. I'm just saying. His visions were preferred future. The preferred future. So he was looking at what is and what could be. And he wanted to insert himself into that. This is what it is right now. This is the situation right now. How can I get it to what it could be? And so this is what happens. He prays, but not for a miracle. And if you were here last week, you heard Gerald talk about this a little bit, but he doesn't pray for a miracle. Rather, he prays for an opportunity. He prays for favor and for success. He prays for an opportunity. He actually prayed and fasted for 4 months. This was his step one. He was patient and respectful and honoring. I bet if Nehemiah was here right now and we asked him, hey, was that a waste of time? He would say, absolutely not. That was the best thing I could be doing, is waiting and praying for those 4 months. I think we can learn a lot from this. I think we can learn a lot about Nehemiah's obedience, because it's really his obedience to God that gives him strength to wait and to pray in his mourning. Even though he's broken and he wants to do something, he waits and he prays for his people. Last week we talked about maybe you want to, raise kids who are men and women of character. And instead of praying that it just happens or they end up that way, what if you prayed for moments? Or maybe even just a single conversation to start speaking truth into your kid's life. Maybe you want to invite your friend to be a part of what's happening here, and you're thinking, and maybe you're praying, I just hope they just come one day or just stumble in. Maybe you could pray for a conversation, one opportunity to invite them, one opportunity. Maybe you're not sure how you even feel about God or church or the Bible, and you've said your last Hail Mary prayer of, God, show yourself to me in this big miraculous way. But what if you prayed, show yourself to me, even in a small way, a small moment, a small opportunity that you can show yourself to me, and make yourself be known and real. So let me ask you this question. What opportunity are you praying for? If we're taking plays from Nehemiah's playbook, what opportunity is it that you are praying for? When you look around your circle of influence, the people around you, what are you praying to happen? What is it that you are praying to happen? Because Nehemiah would say this, what you pray for, well, it matters. The length of time you pray for that and how much you pray for that, it also matters. It also matters. But if we were looking at Nehemiah's story for leadership, then he takes it a step further. And this is where we're actually starting today, and some of you are thinking, you've been talking for 30 minutes and you're just now starting. Great. This is where we're starting today. Nehemiah prays for success and favor with the king. And then we read this. This is chapter 1, verse 11. Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king. I was cupbearer to the king. So we see in Nehemiah's time of waiting, well, he not only waited and prayed, He got a job. He got a job. The king's cupbearer, well, he had an extremely important job. He tasted all the food and tried all the wine before the king ever did. And some of you are editing your resume right now. I don't think it exists anymore, that job. It sounds fantastic. But he did this for two real reasons. For one, he didn't want the king to eat nasty food, leftovers, or anything that wasn't suitable for the king. And the second thing is this: Nehemiah would try the wine and try the food to make sure it wasn't poison. So there was this trust built between the king and Nehemiah in these 4 months. It was trust and invested time. The king relied on Nehemiah. And Nehemiah just didn't step into this role. I mean, it wasn't like a flyer he grabbed and started. No, it was an honorable job that he invested his time and built trust with the king. But he also did another thing when he was waiting. He got a job, he prayed, but he did one more thing in his waiting, and he did this. He planned. Nehemiah plans for an opportunity. There was another step in this process, another step in the 4 months that we see in Nehemiah's waiting. It was planning. It was praying for success and favor, but planning for success. And I'm not talking about a name it, claim it. I'm saying that Nehemiah knew who God was, knew what God did, and knew what God could do. He didn't know what would happen with the king. He didn't know if it would be a conversation, a question, a moment, an opportunity. He did not know what it was, but he had the faith to know that God would provide something. And so he planned for it. I believe that Nehemiah's obedience to God, well, it not only gave him strength to wait and pray, but it gave him hope to plan. It gave him hope to plan. Now, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they ask me 800 questions a day. And some are easy, right? Like some are like lobs. It's like, Dad, where do apples come from? Trees. Done. Good. What about paper? Also trees. Perfect. And then they increase the difficulty for me. Now, I'm not even talking about like where do babies come from. I could lie. I could tell them the truth. I don't care. That doesn't scare me. What does scare me are questions like, hey, where do toys come from? Oh, they come from factories. They're made out of plastic. Well, where does plastic come from? No clue. Have no idea. Some of you probably someone was like, I used to work in plastics. I'm like, cool, I don't know what that means. Where do leaves come from? Oh, they come from trees. They grow on the trees. How do they grow on trees? Sunlight, water, photosynthesis? I don't know. Could not tell you. There's these moments I have with my kids, and it's such a humbling moment, right? I'm their father, and they're like, my dad's kind of an idiot. Like, he's kind of stupid. He doesn't know where plastic comes from. It grows on a plastic tree. There's these moments with my kids where I feel unprepared, right? I feel like I'm caught off guard. And I feel like, man, I wish I could have prepared for this. So when they asked me these questions, I could have been ready, right? Well, Nehemiah doesn't want to find himself in a similar situation. He's thinking, if I get a chance, if God provides, which I am preparing for, if I get a chance, I'll probably only get one. And I don't want to waste it. I don't want to stutter around. I want to convey my heart and my vision for my home and my people. I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to waste it. So when the opportunity presents itself, I'll be ready. And so let me ask you this. What if we did that? Instead, as we were praying for our kids, for a moment with our kids, to speak truth into their character, what if we read a blog or a book? What if we prepared what we would say to them if we got a chance? What if as you pray for your neighbor, to invite them to be a part of this church, you thought through some scenarios? How best can I invite them? Now, this is not manipulation. This is actually love. This is actually love. How can I best influence you? How can I best influence you? What if, as you prayed the prayer, God, if you're real, let me see an opportunity of it? What if you begin to explore and to read and to ask questions? So when that opportunity comes, you are ready for it. So when any opportunity that you're praying for is in front of you, you're ready. You're prepared. Because the reality is, and I believe this, why should God bring an opportunity my way if I'm not in position to take advantage of it? Why would he bring an opportunity my way if I'm not in a position that I'm ready for that opportunity? And so we see this. We see Nehemiah respond to an opportunity. He's finally in front of this opportunity. And this is where we're starting, Nehemiah 2. It says this, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to him. Like every other day before, Nehemiah walks up with his wine and his food. I had not been sad in his presence before. Now, it was custom when you fasted and prayed to clean yourself up and present yourself well. So you wouldn't boast in your fasting, you wouldn't boast in your mourning. So before, Nehemiah had put on a brave face every day. Even though he's mourning his people and his home, he put on a brave face. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just this day, but he couldn't do it any longer. And so, the king says, this is verse 2. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. Well, this explains a lot of things. How much time Nehemiah spent with the king, that the king recognized his face when it was sad. Up to this moment, Nehemiah had held it together, but he couldn't any longer. Now, this was incredibly dangerous because, the king was very powerful. And if Nehemiah didn't trust him or had plans behind his back, well, then the king wasn't going to trust Nehemiah. And then there goes his position, there goes his life potentially, and there goes his plan and his vision. So this moment is incredibly important when he says, why is your face so sad? And this is what Nehemiah says. I was very much afraid. Now don't forget, he spent 4 months praying and prepping for a moment and fasting for a moment, knowing that God would provide a moment. And he's still afraid. This gives me some encouragement, right? He's still afraid. And verse 3 says, but, and I believe this is one of the prettiest buts of the Bible. John loved that. The big old but. But, in the face of fear, but, I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? You see, his obedience, his faith in what God has done and is doing, well, it gives him the extra push in the face of fear. It gives him that extra push. My friend Nick lives in Utah, and I don't know if he's a ninja, but he's like a karate master. He has like triple black belt. I don't know. Anyway, he's very good at karate, and we thought, what 3-year-old and 5-year-old doesn't love karate? And so we got like him to come over to our house and to give like my boys I guess private lessons. He's like 21 years old, so we were like, we'll feed you, and we don't have to pay you. We'll just feed you dinner. And he was like, this is amazing. Thank you. So he's giving them lessons in the backyard, and I'm watching through the window, and they're 3 and 5. I'm thinking that he's just going to have them like kicking cardboard boxes and slicing watermelons with like samurai swords, but he's actually working on hand placements and movements and where your feet are placed and how your body's positioned. And this kind of confuses me and baffles me a little bit. And then he comes inside and we're talking, and I'm like, can I ask you why you are so concerned about, where your hands and movements and where your feet go and how your body moves? He says, Ethan, that's the most important part. I would spend hours and hours and hours working on my form and working on where my hands, my feet, and how my body moves for these competitions. And I would go to these competitions, and they would be 3 judges judging where I have my hands and my body and my feet and how I move. I'm like, well, that's like the opposite of what karate should be, right? Like, karate should be I'm in a back alley and I get attacked and I should be able to kick butt, right? Like, I'm not going to be worried about like, oh, sorry, I can't fight you because my back was not straight enough. It doesn't make any sense. And he says, no. The goal is this. You work hours and hours and hours on your form, and your mind and your body actually remember these movements. And so when something happens and you're attacked and fear and adrenaline and scenarios are going through your mind, then you can actually respond. In the face of fear, your body remembers up to 75 to 85% of what you've practiced. This baffled me. And I'm not saying that Nehemiah was a karate ninja, but I think he understood this concept. I think he understood the concept. When fear and adrenaline and the scenarios of all that could happen, including losing my life, were in front of me, well, all the prep and all the prayer and the fasting, it kicked in. His obedience to God pushed him across the line of fear. So Nehemiah is standing in front of the king. And he says this to the king. And then verse 4, the king said to me, his response, "What is it you want?" Nehemiah, what is it that you're trying to say? What are you looking for? I mean, this moment is incredible. The wealth and the power of the entire kingdom is wrapped up into this one phrase, this one question, this one opportunity that Nehemiah prayed for and planned for. And now he was finally there. But he does one more thing. Then I prayed to God, the God of heaven. He prays one more time, even in this moment. The moment's in front of him, and he prays one more time. One more time. Verse 5 says, "And I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." This is Nehemiah's moment. He's made his request. Then the king, this is verse 6, then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take, and when will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. The king's answer was yes. I mean, this is an incredible moment. This is a powerful king. His answer was yes. And what happens is, if you continue reading, Nehemiah doesn't just play it safe. He doesn't say, "Okay, I'm out of here." No, he goes all in. He knows he serves a big God, and so he makes a big request. He's granted everything he asked for. They give him permission to go back. They give him help with travel. They help him with protection. They even help him with supplies. It's incredible. So we see Nehemiah, a seemingly ordinary guy, do an extraordinary thing, a very unordinary thing. I mean, this man's broken, mourning, far away from his family and his home. And he does this amazing, unordinary thing. How? How does he do this? Well, I believe that Nehemiah's faith in God, it produced obedience. He submitted his life to the framework that God had provided. Nehemiah was obedient to God and God's authority, not because of what maybe could happen, but because of what has happened. We see Nehemiah's obedience and his influence with the king cross over, and an extraordinary thing happens. Now, obedience is woven through this entire chapter. And maybe you hear that word and you cringe a little bit. Maybe you hear the word obedience and you feel a little enslaved or trapped. And maybe you had someone in your life who used their authority to hurt you, and I'm sorry. Maybe a boss or an ex-spouse or a parent or even a friend used their influence on you and their authority over you and their power over you to hurt you selfishly. But God, well, He's a loving Father. His authority isn't meant to be selfish. His authority brings freedom. His framework that He gives for our life was a perfect blueprint for us. Not that we'll never have anything ever bad happen again, but it's a perfect blueprint for our lives. Who knows what's best for the creation but the Creator? The Creator knows the best. There's more freedom in the life He has designed for us than there is anywhere else. Now, I want you to imagine a fish bowl, like a simple little fish bowl with a fish in it. And that fish bowl and that fish, well, it's in this giant room. And you kind of start to feel sorry for that fish, right? Like it's like, well, look at how small that fish bowl is compared to the rest of this room. It's sad. Its life is so restricted and enslaved, this little like glass cage, this little prison. So you being, loving, take the fish out and throw it into the room. That's amazing. You save the fish's life, except it dies. Great job. There's more freedom for the fish in this fish bowl than there is in this entire room. And some of us, including myself most of my life, even struggle with today, think that the framework that God has provided for my life, that I'm supposed to be obedient to, is restricting like a glass cage. But there's more freedom in that fishbowl, in that framework, than there is anywhere else. We have more freedom under God's authority than we can find anywhere else. Anywhere else. So the bottom line for today, if you've heard nothing I've talked about fish and getting married to some girl who's obsessed with me, she's here today. I mean, she's right there. Small steps of obedience, just a small step of obedience can reveal God's plan for you. Now, maybe God's plan for you isn't to rebuild a city, but God's plan for you is to soften your heart and love the people around you. To love the people around you and to influence them in the best way you can pray for and plan for. Maybe it's simply changing your heart and praying for the people around you. Now, Nehemiah's obedience to God, what gave him patience to wait when he was mourning. It gave him the patience to wait when he wanted to do something about what was happening. It gave him hope to plan. Done, nothing set in concrete that he would have a moment or opportunity, but he had hope. He had so much hope that he planned for something. So much hope that he planned for something. It gave him strength in the face of his fears. It gave him a strength to push him across that line where he was afraid. And his obedience to God gave him the courage to say, "Send me. I'll go." He didn't say, "Oh, send some of your servants to fix my city." He said, "No, I'll risk my life asking, and then I'll risk my life going." Nehemiah delighted in being obedient to God because of what God had done. He delighted in being obedient when he was waiting. He delighted in the midst of his mourning, in the midst of his preparation. He delighted in being obedient in the midst of his fears. He delighted in the framework that God had provided. He had joy living in the framework. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means a couple things. What if you prayed for planned for, and acted on an opportunity regardless of fear. Regardless of fear. Or maybe it means this for you today. Let me ask you this question. Would you consider this? Will you take a step? Would you consider taking one step toward obedience? One step toward the life and the framework that God has provided, that the Creator has provided for His creation. Would you consider with me taking a step toward that? Now, we can learn a lot of leadership and life lessons from Nehemiah, but ultimately, Nehemiah's story with the king connects us to a much, much larger story. Because you see, Nehemiah, well, he had to build trust with the king, right? He had to build trust over time with the king. He had to work to get close to the king. And he had to wait for an invitation to share his heart and his burden with the king. But you and I, because of what Jesus has done on the cross, his life, death, and resurrection, well, those things aren't relevant anymore. We don't have to work to get close to God. We don't have to build trust over time with God. And we don't have to wait for an invitation to share our burdens with God. We have access to Him and the ability to share our heart with Him. So let me ask you this. Would you take a step with me toward obedience to a God who loves you and wants the best for you and has laid out the best framework for us to live in? Would you pray with me? God, in this moment, I thank you for sending Jesus. I thank you for giving us access to you. We don't have to work for or strive to anything to have access to you. You're a loving Father who has given us a framework to live by. It may not always be a perfect life, but it's the best life, the most joyful and most significant life we could live. So I thank you for that. I pray that as we leave here today, that we could take a step into obedience. That maybe we kind of like wash that word out of our brains because it brings up hurt, and replace it with a positive version of taking a step into the life you want for us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.